Cool, excellent. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the EAG Open Forum. I'm Councillor Stuart Gawley, Portfolio Holder for Climate Action, Recycling and Biodiversity, and Chairman of the Environment Advisory Group. The members of the committee joining me this evening are Councillor Richard Sumner, who is the Vice Chair. He will be with us shortly. He has said he would be a bit late. Nick Carter, who is joining us online. Karen Culver, who is in the room with us. We are expecting Paul Camber and Jeff Mays along at some point. And Martha Vickers Councillor Martha Vickers is also joining us in this evening.
That's fine, Martha. Go ahead.
The following officers are also in attendance this evening to advise and support the meeting. They are Kofi Abdou-Giamfi, Service Lead for Climate Change, Jenny Graham, Environment Delivery Manager, Daniel Warren, Waste Manager, Stephen Shard and Thomas Radbourne are the clerk and Zoom host this evening. And we're also expecting the following guests. We've got Ed Cooper from BioCat with us in the room this evening, and also Rachel Hammond from Edge Landscaping, and Simon Claiborne from Bebout is joining us online this evening. If we hear the evacuation alarm this evening, we must leave the building immediately. Please proceed via the safe emergency exit route, and please follow any instructions given by the officers. Which is the nearest fire exit in this room is to the left here, and then probably out the front door.
Yes.
Either way, yeah, left or right, there are the emergency exits, because we are in a slightly different room to normal. The assembly point is the car park of the Dolphin Pub. If the lockdown alarm sounds, we will remain seated and await instructions from officers. We will adjourn the meeting until such time as it is safe to proceed. Does anyone have any questions on how we're going to run the meeting this evening? Thank you very much. So in terms of the agenda, item 1 is apologies.
Yes, Chairman. So apologies received from Councillors Dennis Pennyworth, Vicky Poor and Owen Jeffrey.
Thank you very much. And the item 2 is minutes of the previous meeting, so the meeting, well, the last meeting, it feels like a long time ago actually, 27th of November 2023, it's like another year. Is anyone got any comments or concerns around the meeting minutes from the 27th November? No? In that case, I would like to propose approval of the minutes from the chair. Does that find a seconder? Councillor Calder. Yes. Thank you. All those in favour? We're in. Excellent. So that's the minutes approved. Do you want me to sign this?
Yeah, go on.
Very much. Let's sign those, and then item 3 is declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest at all? Nothing in the room. Anything online? No. Perfect. In that case, moving swiftly on to item 4, which is Ed Cooper from BioCat on the BMG and nature recovery at Southern Estate. Slides. Okay.
This is number 4, right? Not the nature recovery.
So, everyone who can the screen is sharing. For some reason, it is not showing up on the screen in the room. So I don't know if you can see this at home or not. Anybody?
Yeah, I can do. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're all in business now.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. You ready, Thomas? Right. Okay. So yes, thank you very much. My name's Ed Cooper from BioCat. We are a small not-for-profit company limited by guarantee and charity that was set up to address biodiversity loss through natural capital markets and local partnerships. I have a background in this area in that I set up and ran the Pang Kennet Valley Countryside projects and project managed the restoration of Greenham Common. Then I worked in the public and private sector for a while, and 3 years ago I popped out of that and set up BioCat to try and do something about biodiversity loss. We may already be aware, but there's no harm in reminding us briefly that there's a load of drivers of change at the moment. We have biodiversity loss, which is fundamentally a proper crisis now, if we analyse it and look at it coldly, look at the data. We have biodiversity net gain upon us now. The new Environment Act that came into force in November requires developers to have 10% net gain or better. And it's all being implemented February the 12th, the main parts of the legislation as far as we're concerned. Clearly, there's climate change, and we are all collectively aiming for net zero by 2030. Agriculture has a part to play in that, and the farmed landscape. Farmers are responsible for about 10% of the UK emissions, so we need to start working on that with landowners. The government has called for nature-based solutions as part of the long-term strategy of how we deal with these with all these issues. The government's Climate Change Committee and Natural Capital Committee both want a balanced approach, and there are a number of targets out there that drive the kind of work we're doing. 30,000 hectares of trees, 30% of the land protected by 2030, nutrient neutrality zones, and maybe more to come. And then there was Brexit. So leaving the Common Agricultural Policy, the potential for the new Environmental Land Management Scheme, and all of the uncertainty that poses landowners. So at Solemn Estate, they've responded to this change. And BioCat has triggered that response by working with them and presenting to them and agreeing a way forward with them. We are looking to create habitat. We will be seeking to take advantage of the biodiversity net gain payments 10%. We're going to create a habitat bank, and the work's already underway. The landowner has started the work irrespective of not receiving any contracts at this stage. He's speculatively going ahead with the work, and it's a long-term project. It's also linked in with your Natural Solutions Partnership, and in effect is a pilot project for that organisation to get to grips with how all the processes will work around habitat creation, biodiversity net gain, carbon sequestration, and maybe more. We've been working with partners, and there's a long list of partners there, and sort of pretty much everybody on the patch has been involved. Part of our approach is to try and build local capacity. So that is all about partnerships and making sure that as a region, we can respond to this new emerging market in natural capital. So now I'm going to take you on a whistle-stop tour through the Solemn Estate project. So get Tom. So what we have on Solemn Estate at the moment, up on the plateau near Tilehurst, is large arable fields primarily. Pretty open, pretty bleak from a wildlife perspective, farmed relatively intensively and conventionally. And here are a few shots, and you can see there's quite large expanses ploughed every year. Not a great deal of thought has gone on in the past to soil quality, water quality, to the level of inputs, etc. The project area is here. It's actually 130 hectares of land. It is marginal land. The arable farming is not massively profitable. It's on relatively poor soils. We're up on the plateau on the edge of Reading. So we've got Pangbourne in the top left of the screen and Reading to the right in the east. And we've got 3 project areas, Railway Field, Stonehams Farm and Sadler's Farm. There's a very well used right-of-way network around the site. And what is driving all this, as well as our activity, is the commitment of Henry Scutt, the landowner, who has a very strong environmental commitment and a positive approach to benefiting and generating good social outcomes. And that's truly is the case in this instance. Next slide, please. And we're working towards a mosaic landscape of high conservation value. I'll explain the detail of these slides in a bit, so don't get too hung up on them. But basically, that whole landscape is going to be widely used by people. It will be farmed extensively, so it's quite a change in the farming, and we're looking to create a rich in wildlife. But the main thing to take away is there's going to be a mosaic of habitats, as opposed to bare annually worked arable fields. So we go from the top picture to something resembling the lower picture. 5 years in, this is what you might see. There's a hedgerow growing on the right, there's cattle grazing, there's wildflower meadows, there's scrub growing on the left, and the odd sort of standard tree beginning to pop up. Next slide. And so we want more of this. We want more biodiversity. We've got things going, like we've got volunteers doing butterfly surveys, we've got breeding bird surveys, and we will measure this change. We will work over the 30-year period to maximise the biodiversity on the site. And that's genuine aim, is that we will be continually trying to improve the biodiversity on this site. So the principles we put into this project are that biodiversity enhancement is centre stage. There is a possibility with natural capital that one agenda can drive habitat creation. So if you were going for carbon, you'd plant spruce trees, which wouldn't be particularly biodiverse or particularly appropriate for our landscapes. If you're going for nutrient credits, you do something different again. So we believe that if you design habitat with biodiversity at the core of it, and the landscape, biodiversity in the landscape, you are creating a high integrity project, and you will also store carbon, you will improve soils, you will improve water quality as well. So we've done a reference to what was present. So we've looked at historic maps and looked at the character areas, and we've taken them into account when we've designed the habitat, as I'll show you in a bit, and we consulted widely with everybody. We've been informed by what is present, so we've done a raft of surveys. We've done a baseline survey with TVERC, done small mammals, reptiles, breeding birds, butterfly transects, and an access use survey to see how people are using the land. And we've taken a partnership approach. So as I said, we've consulted. And there will be a lot of benefits for local people, as well as the biodiversity. There's the wellbeing element of that area of land on the west of Reading, which is very widely used. This is actually an overlay of historic maps. And hopefully you can see, if you look at the white area in the middle, which is Stonehams Farm, you can just about make out, sorry, it's not brilliantly clear, but it's not easy to do this. But you can see all the old field boundaries and hedgerows that were present. At the moment, there's nothing there now. So we're going to create this mosaic of habitats. If you look at Stonehams now and do the baseline survey, you get this. So basically arable field, nothing there. And what we're moving to is this. So you can see, and I'll explain this a bit further. So in the top left, or the top of the picture, you've got an orchard. We're going to plant a walnut orchard. That is semi-commercial, but very long-term, but it will have significant wildlife benefits as well. It'll have a meadow underneath that's mown.
Why walnuts?
Why walnuts? Because they are a commercially viable crop. And they do create some biodiversity, particularly with the grazed pasture underneath. Okay. We've got parkland in the next field down, and then the green and yellow hatched area is an area of chalk grassland. We've got scrub. The areas with crosses on are scrub. They will be grazed scrub in the future, so we're going to plant scrub, let it establish, and then the fences will come down and animals will graze it. So you get this variety of structures on the land. The main areas that are with the green horizontal bars are species-rich grassland, which will be extensively managed. They've already been seeded. So about 50 hectares of land was seeded this autumn, 6 different seed mixes, 30 to 40 species in each seed mix. So we've seeded for wildflower meadows primarily in the long term. And then the other areas where you've got the hatching and the mosaic effect on the left there are woodland areas. There's an area of coppice woodland that will be planted and managed as coppice, some woodland plantation with scrub edge and meadow areas interspersed. So we end up with this very rich and diverse mosaic. And then the squiggly purple and green lines that you might see are hedgerows. So on the project as a whole, there's 5 kilometres of new hedgerow going in. So quite large quantities. Now we'll whiz through the others because it's a bit more of the same. That's railway field. So as you can see, arable field with a bit of temporary grassland on the right. And it's going to be, Tom, yeah, Again, grassland with scrub around the edges and a wetland in the centre. We're working with the AONB and Action for the River Kennet. A wetland has been designed, and and we're going through planning at the moment to get permission for that. So there will be a permanent wetland area, and the aim of this area is to increase ground nesting birds and breeding birds, with a particular focus probably on lapwing. Okay, slide. Sadler's Farm, largely arable, a little bit more variety here. There's a couple of good ponds with newts in them, but we are enhancing that, creating more scrub areas. We've picked up on woodland areas that used to exist from the historic maps, a new hedgerows going in, and a number of new ponds. And 3 of the ponds have already been dug by the Freshwater Habitat Trust, and they're going to monitor them. And the hope is that they are increased habitat for the great crested newts. But again, you can see you get a very broad mosaic of habitats on Sadler's Farm. That's one of the new ponds that's been dug. Early days, but it's there. It's all the work is underway. Okay. And the other thing to bear in mind is that this site is covered by rights of way. The green lines are the rights of way, and we're increasing the access through the use of permitted paths. So the dotted white lines create circular walks, and they largely follow desire lines that people are using to some extent now. But everybody needs to bear in mind the land is still going to be farmed. It's now going to have livestock on it with extensive grazing, whereas in the past it's been arable. So there is quite a change going on for people. There's been quite a lot of new fences and a lot of new hedgerows going up.
Just tell us what sort of livestock you're going to have on there.
Yeah, he's got a herd at the moment which are British Simmental, so they're large beef animals. They're not really appropriate for this. So he's moving to a traditional breed, which I believe are Sussex, which are smaller and more malleable, more easy to handle, and hopefully will be okay with the public. But largely they will be fenced as well. One of the things we can achieve through livestock grazing, hedgerows and fencing is a little bit of management of people and their dogs as well. But we are preserving the open views, we're preserving all the existing walking areas, but we will to some extent be managing them such that some areas stay quiet for wildlife, particularly ground nesting birds.
So,
Next slide, please. We've got a phased approach. We've completed the reseeding of Stonehams with the basic grassland. So around about 50 hectares. That's all taken quite well. We had Charles Flower helped with some of the seed mixes. He visited the other day and was quite pleased with the germination we've got, which is good. The fencing work has just started. The wetland, as I said, is in planning. The hedgerow work has just started. I think they started this week, planting the first tranche of hedgerow. Some ditches have been dug, and some tree planting is due to start in another week or so, the first little area of woodland. So the work is all underway. The ongoing management will be to maximise the biodiversity. So it's primarily extensive grazing, hay cuts on some areas. So it's cattle, occasional sheep. We're going to graze some of the scrub areas in the long run. There will be an area of coppice woodland. There'll be an area of walnuts, and there'll be some areas of broadleaf woodland with ponds and wetlands as well. And the outcomes are 80 hectares of species-rich meadow, 17 hectares of scrub, 25 hectares of woodlands, around about 30,000 trees, that sort of order. 1.5 hectares of wetland, minimum of about 4.6, it might be 5 kilometres now, I think. So that's about 28,000 hedgerow plants. I've put the thousands in because I get quite annoyed because in the national press, people keep producing stories and going 100,000 trees. And it's not a lot, actually. Sounds a lot, but it's not. We're nearly up in those numbers on one project. And a 4 hectare nut orchard. We're going to create biodiversity units, and we will sequester quite a bit of carbon. And some carbon emissions will be reduced because of the management change. We haven't calculated all that fully yet. Some of the methodologies for carbon calculation are not fully developed. There are toolkits and audit tools, but they're not brilliantly researched or robust at this moment in time, particularly carbon in soils. Seems to be a bit of a work in progress. Next slide. And that's it. So there's a transformation that's well underway. Mosaic of habitats. That's the thing to take away, really, is we're going from arable fields to a mosaic approach, extensively grazed, managed for wildlife. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Ed. I think just quickly from the chair, so obviously Martha and Tony Vickers and I went and saw the site and met Henry before Christmas, wasn't it? And I have to say, Henry is such an engaging character, genuinely cares for what he's doing. I left thinking, what an awesome, what's the word I'm looking for? Completely forgot, lost the word that I'm looking for. Yes, project to have in our district is the word I was looking for. It's really good to see, and I think we obviously were lucky enough to see the 3 sites and see what they are now, and see what the hope and the desire is to get in it. Genuinely looking forward to seeing it develop over the next years and decades. So thank you very much, Ed. And yes, any questions for Ed?
Well, obviously, this is great. As Stuart said, we went to see it, so it much as you showed there, that it's pretty barren, so it's great. And so you are sort of piloting away, or the first of of many.
Yes.
So part of what you'll be doing, hopefully, will be educate, raise awareness of other landowners, so that, because not everybody is like Henry. So how do we help other landowners to follow his example?
We've got potentially about 10 projects that might go ahead. What we're doing at the moment, we're working with Jenny and her team and the Natural Solution Partnerships to explore the natural capital market side of things, which I think you might be hearing about later. We're also exploring other sources of funding outside biodiversity net gain. So we are in dialogue with organisations in the city, actually, where corporate funding might come in, corporate investment into nature may occur. So we're going to explore all this. So we're right at the cutting edge of a new market, and everybody involved is trying to work out how these markets are going to work, and that's what we're doing. And we're using Sullum and a couple of other landowner projects as the pilots to try and tease all this out. But the hope is that once we prove the revenue streams are viable and work, and that the contracting can work, that will give other landowners the comfort, and they will then start to adopt it and get on with it. At the moment, there's a lot of people sitting on the fence, and there's odd things that are there's other odd barriers like tax, for instance, that are potentially slowing things down. And all of this is getting steadily clarified. So on the tax side, for instance, I gather the government are going to, or HMRC are going to tell landowners how biodiversity net gain will get treated from a tax perspective in the spring. So everything is steadily lining up. But we're pushing all the time, trying to get the contracting side through and get our first deal underway.
Public, you because when we were there, we saw the dogs running around or creating a lot of havoc.
We've been to Pangbourne Parish Council, Purley Parish Council, Tylehurst Parish Council, and done a very similar talk to that. It's been published in Tylehurst Parish Magazine. We have our West Berkshire Natural Meetup group, which meets sporadically at the moment, actually, but in the Corn Exchange, where we talk through these projects, and anybody's welcome. So yes, there are forums where we try and engage the public. Our main drive at the moment is to try and find the buyers and get the contracting side underway and get the money, because my belief is that once we land one deal and show it works, the other landowners will come on board in a bigger way.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers, Tony. You're muted, sir.
Still muted.
Thank you. Sorry, I thought I'd unmuted myself, but didn't work. Thank you for allowing me to ask a question while Ed's here. I'm sure we'll come on to this later in the agenda. But my question to Ed is, as you know, it's great to have an early adopter of this capital market idea, but how dependent upon biodiversity net gain from planning applications is Henry in this case, or is he looking to other sources of funding, like you said, the financial markets and so on?
I think it would be fair to say he's relying on biodiversity net gain to fund this project in the medium term. He is going to produce a lot of biodiversity units. He doesn't necessarily expect to sell all of them or at the current price, but he does want to see some sales to recoup the funds he's already spent, and he's spent a fair bit of capital already. So he is speculatively doing this work in the hope of recouping the costs.
Thanks very much. Well, we are very lucky to have him, I'd say, somebody who is so enthusiastic and is prepared to take that financial risk, because we're, as you said, it's a very immature market.
Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Stuart. Yeah, this is fantastic. Really good to get an update on this. The 10 projects that you mentioned, are they all in Berkshire or are they actually in neighbouring?
They're all in West Berkshire.
Yeah, okay. And this is going to be part of the Nature Recovery Network ultimately as well, is it? Have we got any triple SIs or anything else around that area?
None of this work will take place on SSSIs, but for instance, on this project, we are actually going to take a hay cut from a neighbouring SSSI and then spread the hay on that railway field to try and take the seed basically and get germination of plants that are native to the area and from a similar field. The work of the local nature recovery strategy is ongoing. What I see we're doing here is a precursor to the actual work, to the delivery of that local nature recovery strategy. So we are getting on with it, and at some point we will link up. I think pretty much everything we're doing will be entirely compatible with the local nature recovery strategy. And indeed, if we generate the revenue streams that we're hoping to generate, we are potentially creating a funding route for the delivery of the local nature recovery strategy in the longer term. And that would be my aim. And if we can pull that off and get ahead of some of the other regions maybe as well, we open up the option of the local nature recovery strategy being something that actually gets implemented. Because we've had, as a few of you may be aware, we've had a number of plans like this over the last 10 to 20 years. So it'd be great if we can have one that actually we can follow through on. And to do that, we need different sources.
Right. I mean, you mentioned other regions. How are we doing? I mean, obviously we're going to be working across the whole of Berkshire, and we've got the Royal Borough who are leading on a lot of this. How are we doing compared with the other 5 unitaries and Oxfordshire and so on and so forth? Have they got similar projects on boil?
Oxfordshire is definitely looking at all the same stuff. And I was at a conference actually where they were basically saying, well, if Oxfordshire can't sort it out themselves, nobody will be able to. And they're talking of raising their own funds and things like that, because they've got that structure already in place, linked to primarily having the university and in the centre. So they're ahead. They were also a pilot area. When DEFRA announced all this, there were a few pilot areas. So the pilot areas tend to be a bit further ahead. So the South Downs National Park have got a habitat bank underway. We are actually pretty much at the same stage. So we caught them up. But they may be further ahead in terms of making a sale. The planning authority here is taking its time to get to grips with it, but we now are on course to take this through in the next year or so, I hope. But it has taken a while. We're not in the lead, but we're by no means at the back end of all this. We're probably ahead in some of our thinking around how a local market might work.
Councillor Abbs.
Right, thank you. Sorry, and the buttons don't press very quickly at this end for some reason. I know, well, obviously, Stuart, I knew 1 or 2 other opportunities that were bubbling away in the background that hopefully Kofi and yourself are following through with, or Jenny. Is Ed involved in those, or have they been parked now? Or because, we have our own land, and then we had another farmer also talking about doing exactly the same. So have we engaged?
Yeah,
I'm trying to not give I'm trying not to give away anything commercially sensitive, which is why I'm being opaque about this.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Councillor. So we're looking at a number of options, and we're looking to progress a more detailed call for sites. As a council, whilst we are very happy for the leading work that Ed is doing, we should be seen to be neutral, especially as we also a local planning authority. So we work with Ed wherever appropriate, but fair to say that for the other schemes that will be coming in the pipeline, we will not necessarily involve Ed directly in those.
Okay, so let me ask it in a slightly different. Has Ed and others been asked to quote on other work?
Not that I'm aware of.
Right, so
We-
so there are no other opportunities in the pipe at the moment. No. Okay, so Stuart, let's have a chat about that because I don't understand where at least two of them went, but that's not for the open forum. Okay.
It is possible that I am in dialogue with the landowners, but I don't know.
Yeah, Ed, I mean, obviously I can't say anything in this forum, so
No,
yeah,
fine.
no worries.
There's James Ackworth in Hungerford, who I know has put his details on the
I'm-
nature recovery.
I've
map,
been working
which
with
is in the
James, so
public
I'm very
domain.
much aware of James is. And James too has, he's got 2 parcels of land that he's prepping for biodiversity net gain. One of them, the work's underway. And he's at a very similar stage to Solomon in reality. He started the work. He does have biodiversity units he could trade now. And he's got another site that he will shortly start the work on, I think. So he again is going for it to some extent.
Okay, well, without
Yeah,
naming
albeit with
people,
a-
Ed, are you working with anybody in the very west of the area? Not Fulham, though.
I've got a dialogue going with one of the estates to out not the very west, but out west of Newbury. Yeah.
Well, okay, so southwest. It was a lady that owns the farm, so if that gives you a clue.
No, I'm not working with that one. I don't think.
Okay.
We'll catch up at,
Yeah,
Adrian.
all right, cheers.
It'll be one of the ones that I might not know about. I'm trying to piece them together. Cool. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ed, for coming along. We've got a lot on the agenda tonight, so I'm going to move on if that's okay. Thank you for that, Ed. So moving on to item 5 on regenerative farming. Nice to have Rachel Hammond along from Edge Landscaping. You're happy to present that?
Thank you.
Marvellous.
Yes,
Do
lovely,
you
thank
have
you.
some oh yeah, okay, come in. I can see them. Marvellous. Over to you, Rachel. Thank you very
Lovely,
much.
thank you. Thanks for inviting me here. Obviously, let me know if you can't hear me online. Yeah, so I'm Rachel. I've grown food all my life. I'm a landscape architect, and through my company Edge, which is not for profit, we design spaces for food and for biodiversity. We also teach people about growing food. And I'll say a bit more about our different activities as we go through. So tonight, I am hoping to convince you that of these 3 main objectives, that we need to build soil, that we need to integrate trees. We all know we need to plant trees, but my suggestion is that we need to integrate trees and that we need more local food production. So we'll see how I go with that. Okay, so current farming methods, it takes about 10 to 12 calories worth of fossil fuels to produce 1 calorie that reaches our plate. Anybody who can't even do maths can see that that's not sustainable. A large part of that is down to the chemical input of non-organic farming. So all farms are not the same. And that's, of course, you know, the production of the chemicals, the use of the elements that go into it, the transportation, the manufacture, etc. As an example, raspberries receive 30 applications of a chemical in their life before they reach our plate. So obviously going organic is one way to deal with the chemical element of that, and that's a big tick, and that removes a lot of that energy that goes into food production. But that is not the whole picture, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about regenerative, which isn't easy to say. So, under organic, ploughing is allowed, as is harrowing and various kind of rotivation techniques, cultivation of the soil. Ploughing 1 hectare of land releases 1 tonne of CO2 into the atmosphere. So even organic farmers with the best will in the world not using chemicals are still contributing to carbon emissions. So regenerative. I like these definitions of the word regenerative. So the improvement of a place or a system, certainly in terms of farming systems, it can improve those, making it more active or successful, and bringing a new or more vigorous life and reviving it. And I think for me, all of those things are true when we talk about regenerative farming. So I talked to you about building soil. Modern farming methods, generally the soil is kept alive using these chemical applications. Again, I'm talking about non-organic farming. And that means that what happens with the soil is that it's not alive. It's not being kept alive by any biodiversity. There's nothing in the soil holding its structure. And so what that means is that when we get any heavy rain, those top layers can just get washed off. And similarly with wind, the wind can blow off the top layers and you end up with a picture like the one on the left. So with regenerative, what we want to be doing is always building soil, putting more into the soil than we're taking out, building quality as well as quantity. So we're always looking at building that soil rather than depleting it. So a lot of my work is around market gardens and production of fruit, veg, herbs, nuts, edible flowers, possibly some eggs. So what if we had 1 hectare and all the farms immediately switched to regenerative? Well, we would have a short-term issue of supply of organic matter, because to set up a truly regenerative site from nothing, we will need to be importing a lot of organic matter. And I'm not going to get too much bogged down in the detail here, but in terms of things like wood chip, compost, etc. So all of that then would be brought in from the outside of that farm, which would cause an issue if everybody was doing the same, because that organic matter has to come from somewhere. But what if we had 1 hectare and we farmed 1/10 of it intensively? So that's shown with the circle in the middle. But 9/10 of the hectare were used to create all of the biomass that we needed to keep that 1/10 of the hectare going and building soil. So we've got things like trees, nut orchards, fruit orchards, grazing animals, meadows, ponds, etc. happening in those 9/10. And the biomass from all of those systems, for example, weeds from a pond, tree cuttings, hedge clippings, etc., can all go into the compost and the biomass needed to keep that 1/10 of a hectare growing. Okay, so with my designing and our application of regenerative food production, we are suggesting that a market garden could produce somewhere in that range of money per year per square metre, which is decent. I don't have something to compare it to. I'll let you make your own comparisons. So with this kind of work, we work with a number of different projects. So Vedshed is in Hampshire. I'm sure a lot of you know Sheepdrove locally. So we have the market garden there. And Planton Farm is in Shropshire, and it is a truly regenerative farm, farming with animals and regenerative. So next slide. So here's a couple of pictures. So on Planton, they have 120 hens, 15 cows. I'm setting up a market garden for them there. They also have various other small-scale enterprises on the farm. Now, I was asked to talk about scale tonight and how regenerative can apply to scale. Now, at Planton, they can sell their eggs 5 times over from 120 hens, but they're not going to increase their number of hens because they want to make sure that that quality of care and the quality of the product is there. Even though they've got the land and they've got the market, they're not going to upscale their hens. But what they are going to do is they're going to upscale in terms of replication. So instead of there being one massive farm that might employ 2-3 people on machinery, there might be 10 farms, each of which employs 2-3-4 people. So actually what we're doing is we're creating more of an economy and creating more jobs. So in terms of scale, we need to be looking less at this and more at this. Okay, thank you. So this is a really nice example. This is in France, and this is an example of what an integrated farm might look like. So you've got water, forest garden, veg garden, trees, meadows, animals. It's all integrated together, and it means that the yield and the output is higher, and therefore that farm's making more money per square metre. These are a couple of their systems, just closer up, so you can start to see how the trees might look integrated into each of those systems. So inside their large polytunnel greenhouse, there are trees, there are vines, there's a chicken shed, which is that structure in the middle, also a number of other elements incorporated within that greenhouse to create a whole ecosystem. And the same on the left, you've got trees which are adding their roots and therefore fungi networks to the soil, building soil life, and increasing the health of that soil as well as the volume of it. So there's a couple of pictures from Sheepdrove. We've just literally taken it on since September, so it's early days. but the idea is that we'll be delivering training there. We'll be using it as a demonstration market garden. So we run farm start training, which is technically for growers, people that want to become growers and earn money from growing food. And there is a real need for proper education for food growers of the future, because our current food and farming network is not going to supply our food long term. Fossil fuel use within farming is not available long term. So we have to find other solutions. And by training growers and starting smaller scale farms such as Plantain and doing it in a regen way, we are providing hope for our food and farming sector. So I wanted to finish with the potential of Newbury as a case study for West Berkshire to grow some of its own food. And again, I'm talking about fruit, veg, nuts, herbs. We're not really talking, possibly eggs, but we're not talking kind of large scale cereals. So at the moment, yeah, I've just summarised the acreage and the population for you to hold in your head. So what if we created public edible gardens, food forests, however you want to call them? I've put the sizes in the bottom, but I'll come back to that. And then we dotted those about the town of Newbury where we had some green space. Now, I'm not suggesting that all green space goes by a long way. We need green space for recreation and for sport and exercise and dog walking, etc. I'm not suggesting we scrap all our green space, but this could become integrated within some of it. Now, the average person eats about 182 kilograms a year of fruit and veg, so that's a kind of baseline statistic. So that's what we're looking to supply for each person that lives within the area. And you can see with the dots on the map, I've pinpointed green areas. Again, this is a conceptual design, so this is all up for discussion. So we've come out with 34 potential sites for smaller gardens or slightly larger gardens. And the space that I've included is 167,500 metres squared thus far. Which at my yield statistic, which I use, which I won't go into tonight, but I'm very happy to discuss it in more detail with somebody, 17 kilograms per metre squared per year gives us that amount of tonnage, so 2,800 tonnes. Which by my estimations could feed around about a third of Newbury. So, it's a start. Also on top of that, you've got potential of egg production from undergrazing birds, mushroom production, etc. Again, I won't go into the detail of that particular design, but it's of course possible to tweak the food forest as to the needs. Creating employment, training opportunities, of course, biodiverse habitats. Everything we do incorporates biodiversity, and that therefore results in more food and more money being retained within the local economy. So I hope I've gone some way to convincing you that we need to do those three things, and I'm very happy to take some questions.
That's really, I like that. It's really quite interesting. I don't know how it will all be coordinated, and we do have I belong to a little group which started off with the function of growing edible crops, a volunteer group in Newbury.
Yeah.
We didn't sort of get tremendously far, but we planted orchards.
Mm-hmm.
But this is with the town council, so you really need to be talking to town and parish councils and not just the district here. So it's quite a complicated project, sure, to get all these little bits of land. But this is with volunteers, so there's no sort of money or proper organisation. And quite frankly, we could do with a few more experts to help us with our little orchards to make them more productive. But I think there is a feeling out there that this would be a great thing to do. Susan sitting next to you there is involved in projects as well, but more to do with forest and planting. But Susan has some expertise here, and she works with this little organisation called Growing Newbury Green. So I think there is a little bit of, but so far it's only just volunteers that I'm aware of out there. How the councils would help there. The land. We talk about land and etc. It all gets rather complicated. Mm-hmm. And we did try when we started the edible crops project. We were going to do stuff in Victoria Park, So we were thinking of a truly edible crops
Yeah.
project. Actually, planting, things that the local nursery could help with and they could eat. But then we had issues about, we've got the dogs and how to keep the dogs off, and nobody's going to want to eat this stuff because you've got people walking their dogs past it. So when you've got stuff in the middle of a population like that, but I like the idea. I don't know whether other people have got comments. Yeah.
Tony Vickers, Councillor Tony Vickers, you've got your hand up as well.
Yes, yeah, hello, thank you. Yeah, my battery was running low. I was rushing off to plug it in, but I can survive to ask the question. I mean, similar really, but I noticed your map of the Newbury area included some blobs around Sandalford, and also, of course, the area you covered is not just Newbury Town Council. It's, as Martha said, it's lots of surrounding parishes. We're very short of allotments in Newbury, and when I was on Greenham Parish Council, they have no allotments within their area, but you go to all the landowners and they've got options with developers. They're just not interested. And until a development comes forward and you can negotiate with the developers, as we've started to do with Bloor Homes on Sandalford, you're not going to have a starter. Yeah, I like the idea of private gardens, but to do this at scale and the numbers you're talking about, we've got to actually work with the developers. Have you spoken to any of the developers that are currently in the system in West Berkshire?
No, that was purely a conceptual design to show the possibilities.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Abs, you had your hand up. Has your question been answered, or do you still wish to ask?
No, I thought I'd left my hand up, but it was a mistake. Forget it.
Okay, nice. Councillor Corbett.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you very much for that, Rachel. I should have declared an interest at the start. I did Rachel's course back in September time at Sheep Drove, which was great. I think this is a really great idea. If there's any way we can integrate this with the Nature Recovery Network and the landowners that we're working with on that, if they are doing the mosaics that Ed talked of, having little market gardens as part of that, I think would work really well. It would get people into those areas doing some labour, but also appreciating the wider landscape. I think one of the good things about the council is we have networks. So obviously Kofi and his colleagues will know a lot of people. We've got the Parish Climate Forum, so it might be worth Rachel speaking of that as well, the point that Martha made about needing to reach out to the parishes as well as just the town. So I think that would be a very good thing to do. And I think the more we can, the great thing about this forum, and I think it's been brilliant since the election, this is out in public and people can come and speak and members of the public can watch, because one of the great things about it is that we can network. So it's not just about coming to the council and saying, right, can you give me some money for a project or whatever? It's actually, how can we work together? How can we use our skills and experience? Everyone knows loads of other people. And it's getting human networks as well as the nature recovery networks up and running so well. So anything we can do to help Rachel and to put her in touch with people in other forums, I think would be great.
I would have a market, we could bring them to the market. I guess good idea, actually. I'd love to see something like that happen, but don't know where we start.
Ed,
is that all right?
Go for it.
The suggestion I would have is that you try and come up with a pilot project and prove the commercial model. Because if you can prove the commercial model,
There's numerous examples that I can give.
This type of approach might fit in with biodiversity net gain activity and other activities. Might, don't know, depend on individual landowners, but it might. But you'd need a fairly robust and strong commercial model, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if you know Incredible Edible, people will know the success shown in Todmorden of the local economy there.
Yes.
And how local food can really turn the economy of a town around. And I think for me, that's really, for me, the commercial aspect of it is there's so much potential there. And that is such a good case study of a town that's really been turned by local food.
I think from the chair, I'll take the opportunity to ask you questions. I think obviously I saw the slide deck that you shared, Councillor Culver, and one of my parish councils that I sit on is on there, Speen, and actually it's a fantastic idea for the working party, the improvement working party, to take a look at this. We do have some good green space, even just outside Newbury, Marsh Benham, there's a site there which we don't really know what to do with as a parish council sometimes. So I think it would be really good to, introduce you to that parish council. But in terms of the wider network of parish councils, have you had a chance to speak to those folks at all?
I'm fairly new to Newbury,
Right,
so
okay.
just starting out on my networking journey.
Cool. I think the the Parish and Town Climate Forum is a really good place to start in terms of presenting something similar to what you've done, to see if there's interest there. I know certainly from a personal perspective, I think it's something that my own parish council could look at. So I will definitely shoot you a note about that. In terms of like the biggest blocker, what do you see as being the biggest blocker at the moment in terms of uptake? Newbury or in general around the country, has there been any particular downside?
I mean, the biggest block is our current food system, really. But I don't want to make this political. So, but it is. The supermarket system and the system of farming is the biggest block, because it's not, and also it's not what people are taught at agricultural college. They're being taught very much monoculture and spray still. So we've got a big challenge on our hands, to try and make big shifts. And the only way that we can at the moment is local upwards. And then that's our opportunity, and I think Todmorden really shows how possible that is to do that from the ground up and create jobs and create economy. So there is opportunity to do that. But yeah, I mean, let's not go down the road of trying to fight the whole system, but it does, changes are needed, and the current system isn't going to carry on.
You need money to sort of give it a kick start? You're looking for sort of grants?
I'm certainly not asking for money, no. I mean, obviously, if an area wanted to do this, I'm happy to advise, but there needs to be a lot of parties involved in that, to have an across the district system set up. But really, it's projects like Ed's that need to start integrating food. I mean, you've got walnuts, I know, but starting to integrate that kind of food production, because a market garden can be incredibly lucrative. So having a small system like that, like Caroline says, on a land area, can be incredibly commercially productive.
I'm still at Councillor Cole coming quickly, and I'll come back to you, Martha.
Other things that we're thinking about, the cost of living crisis, and then obviously farming needs to be more sustainable in the long term. I'm chairing a healthcare and new developments task and finish group at the moment, and a big part of that is looking at how we prevent health problems. So how do we prevent obesity, for example, and that kind of thing. So I think when we're thinking about these projects, we also think about these other social issues as well, and how projects like this can help to solve those social issues. And also Rachel talked about the job creation. I mean, we've got Newbury College, for example, so that's another partnership organisation. And there's a lot of companies out there doing this ESG, environment, social and governance responsible stuff, get a load of hedge fund managers to go out and spend the afternoon doing a bit of gardening, and everyone feels better for it. So yeah, any way we can think about that as well, because if we can't necessarily give money as a council because of all the cutbacks, we've got our networks, we can reach out to businesses and say to businesses, do you want to get some of your staff to come out and do a bit of work? So there are ways of providing for these projects without having to put a load of readies on the table. Yeah.
That's really good. Yeah, I mean, Newbury College, we've had through the town council, we've had contacts with Newbury College from bloom type stuff. So I know they would be quite enthusiastic. They've already got projects up there.
Yeah.
No, I was just thinking, getting the word out. I mean, we've got this district parish conference tomorrow evening, but it's probably a bit late. I don't know, push something else in, or you're probably busy anyway, but I don't know, that's tomorrow evening, isn't it?
Tomorrow afternoon.
Oh,
Yeah,
this
it's good
afternoon, is it? Sorry, I haven't got the time down. So what's the subject?
I'm not running it. I don't know. I'm afraid.
You're not for subject.
I know I should know.
I don't know.
We do have we will have a parish climate forum coming up fairly soon.
But that's a smaller number.
It is a
isn't
smaller number, yeah. I think that's probably the most.
They're the ones that are most interested, I suppose, aren't they?
Yeah,
It's like a sort of
It would save you going around 43 different parish councils or separately, individually.
But the district parish conference is a good one.
Is another good one, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, can I come back?
Yeah, go on. Yeah, Tony?
I didn't realise Rachel was new to the area, but I really would recommend that she has a conversation with Blore and with Paul Henry, because we've got a vast area of country park that we will eventually take over on the Blore home side. And it's only a 2-minute walk from Newbury College as well, the land that we're looking at. So I think there could, in the matter of a few years, be something coming here. I'm very supportive of this whole idea. Just, I suppose we should declare an interest, Martha and I. Our son is in the business of agroforestry policy development. And that's what this really is, isn't it? It's a sort of, it's what you do in the third world countries, but we can do it here, and you've got the health benefits, you've got the much it's a way for younger generation who are more environmentally aware to get into business. I've spoken to young people in our ward where I am now, west of Newbury, who would dearly love to get into farming, can't find just that small amount of land. Now, if it's done commercially, and if we can tie in with people like farmers markets, and organic food shops and restaurants, I would have thought there's scope for competing perhaps at a different part of the market for this type of food. People who want to avoid the supermarkets. So I think there's conversations to be had, Rachel, locally, and why not start with Sandalford and Blore Homes?
Thank you. Any more questions from around the room? Any more questions from those online? Thank you very much for presenting. It's really interesting. I mean, there's definitely a couple of good opportunities to link you in with various groups and various people. So we'll follow up on that. Cool. So that takes us on to item 6, which is Wildflower Verges trial update. So Simon Claiborne from Bebout, if you are there and ready to present, take it away, please, sir.
Just wait for Mr. Claiborne to join as a panelist. I think he just has.
Good evening, all. Sorry, I just got booted off as I had to rejoin as a panelist there. Sorry, did I miss anything?
No, we were just introducing you, and have you got any slides or anything to show?
Yes, yeah, I'm very happy to share my presentation. So yes, my name is Simon Claiborne, and I've been running the West Berkshire Wild Verges project for the past 3 years. So it's a project that's funded through Section 106 money by West Berkshire Council, and I am employed by the Berks Bucks and Oxfordshire Wildlife Trust. So, project outline, what was going on? Why do we care about verges? So this project solely concentrated on the rural verge network of West Berkshire. So it's about 1,050 miles of rural verge of West Berks that West Berkshire Council is responsible for. This gets cut twice per year by a bloke on a tractor, and he does a 1 meter wide strip cut next to a road. So if it's a wider verge than 1 meter, the back, however wide it is, just gets left. The cutting happens through from March through to September. And the reason why this is the chief issue, really, that you've got the 1 meter wide strip cut, so the whole thing isn't getting cut, where very often they need to be cut, but also having the cutting all the way through the summer means that what he does is he starts his cut on one side of the district in March, and then he goes all the way across the other side of the district and finishes his first cut in mid-June. He then goes back to the beginning of his cutting area and starts his second cut at the latter half of June, and then goes through to September. The problem with this is that there are areas that get cut at the perfect time for really interesting grassland species to thrive and do their thing, orchids and trefoils and all kinds of lovely stuff. And other areas where they get cut at exactly the wrong times, when they're in flower, when they're about to go to seed, but the seeds haven't ripened yet. And it's that kind of thing that we were wanting to help the council change. And yeah, these were the chief outcomes that we were hoping for. So I've written a report that will be coming out to the council soon, but these are the outcomes that will be shown in that. The first thing is that we want to see an increase in biodiversity across the district. We also don't want to be any loss of safety or access. So as a keen walker myself, I know how important verges are as, you know, linking gaps in the footpath and bridleway networks. There's nothing worse than having a 12-foot high bramble thicket where a verge used to be. That's not what we want. We also don't want the safety issues that come from just stopping cutting and, you know, verges overgrowing and growing into the road. We don't want that either. And one of the fun little things that come out of this project is that there are possible significant cost savings that could come out from some of the management suggestions I've penned. So what were we doing over the past 3 years? So we've had 3 summers of surveying. Over 60 local and not so local people have been engaged with a volunteer survey effort. We've managed to survey 33% of the entire network, and that data we've used to sort of spread out and model, fill in the gaps of the bits that we didn't manage to survey. So what did we find? We were looking for indicators of health of verge, you know, good quality, high biodiversity. This is our typical high-grade verge. So this is a verge out at Cwm Gibbet in the southwest of the district. It's on chalk downland. The soil is very thin, very infertile, and when you've got infertile soils and grassland habitats, you get really high biodiversity. There's an inverse correlation with soil fertility and biodiversity in grassland habitats. And you can see here, this is as tall as the sward being sort of the average height of vegetation in a grassland gets at the end of the summer. So this was taken in July, and it's not going to get any taller than that. You know, verges like this may need 1 cut a year. They might need no cuts a year. A lot of this will die back down to the roots. And, you know, yeah, it needs a lot less than 2 cuts per year. This is a medium grade verge. So this is out West Woodhay Way. This is just around the corner from Cwm Gibbet. So these verges are higher in fertility, but they're not high fertility. So you're still getting some nice plants. So we've got a bit of common knapweed here with a nice little skipper sat on it. But you do get a lot of the nasty rough grasses, cocksfoot, things like poor soap grass that can make the most of the limited fertility that is in the soil to sort of dominate the area. So with a bit of management intervention, we can reduce the soil fertility and you'll just get more flowers, and eventually you won't need to cut it as much. You won't need to do the reducing soil fertility works. This is a typical low-grade verge. So this is definitely extremely low in biodiversity and also very, very high in fertility. So East Garston, it's just towards the beginning of the Valley of the Racehorse, up in the northwest of the district. It's surrounded by very intensive arable farmlands and pasture land. It's also down near the Lambourne in the bottom of the river valley. So you can imagine all of the inputs that are going into the surrounding landscape are draining down into this verge. And because it's only getting a 1 meter strip cut twice a year, you know, the fertility is not going anywhere. It's just staying in the soil or, you know, being washed away into the waterways. It's not ideal. So this is, yeah, that's what we think of as rubbish. And that's the kind of verge that would grow into the road and be a safety issue as well. And that's, yeah, we don't want that. We want more cutting on these kinds of verges, not less. So I've come up with 3 management options, ordered in cost versus good stuff coming out of them. So option 1, we get a little bit of biodiversity. There's some short-term savings and some long-term savings. So it's about 6.5% less cutting required per year. And that would be being done on the high-grade verges here highlighted in green. They're about 250 kilometers of high-grade verges out there. So it's the minority of the verges out in the rural network, but there are nice bits out there for us. So option 2 is a little bit more out there. So we get more biodiversity gains from this, but there is some short-term cost. However, there are long-term savings. So the short-term cost would be an increase of management where we're doing something called cut and collect, where you're basically cutting verges and removing the things that you cut, the arisings from that cut, and taking them elsewhere. And that's a really effective way of reducing soil fertility. That'd be done for about 4 years over about 25 hectares of verge. And that would lead to a 21.5% reduction in cutting requirements per year. Option 3 is sorry, this is where option 2 would be happening. So the same would happen in option 1 on the green verges, but option 2 would be happening on these yellow verges, the medium grade ones that need soil fertility reducing. Option 3 is definitely all guns blazing. Huge biodiversity gains, but very high short-term costs with some long-term savings that, they wouldn't outweigh the short-term costs. So you'd be doing the same as in the option 2 with the medium verges, but you'd also be including all of the poor grade verges in there as well, the really low biodiversity ones. You just want to hit them really hard with the cut and collect to reduce the soil fertility, increase biodiversity, and reduce the amount of management you need to do. And that would, be a maximum of a 50% reduction in the cutting required across the network. So that would be the entire network. So green, high grade verges, yellow, medium grade verges, and red is our poor grade verges. So thankfully, Ed has already kind of run through biodiversity net gains. So I will preface this with this whole thing is a bit of a thought exercise. And I really like numbers, but I feel like numbers in the environmental context are generally doom and gloom, but biodiversity net gains seems like it's a lot of really kind of, really positive stuff. So big preface of, if you really want to think about biodiversity net gains on West Berkshire Council land holdings or land that you're responsible for, talk to someone like Ed. This is just me running the numbers out of the back of my project, but effectively, this is what BNG is. So a developer will destroy X biodiversity units. The provider, who could be West Berkshire Council, sells them X units plus an extra 10%, that's your net gain, and the developer pays the provider to create and manage these units for 30 years. So hypothetically, state that again, the rural verge area, so our poor grade verges, is about 110 hectares of grasslands, medium grade verges is about 80 hectares. The possible biodiversity gains from that, so by going at one category in terms of quality, so the poor grade verges are roughly equivalent to poor quality modified grasslands, and the medium grade verges are moderate grade, rather moderate quality modified grassland. The upgrade of just going at one quality category there, that's how many units. And these numbers, again, are hypothetical, but if you wanted to do option 3, there's that amount of money possibly in a hypothetical pot running the numbers that have been supplied by Natural England and DEFRA to do that management work. But again, I'm coming from a tangential point of view here, but I like big numbers. Anyway, moving on. Why is this important for the environment? So if we look at our poor grade verges, there is a net release of carbon because you've got these dominating plants, your nettles and your hogweeds and things like that. They are annual plants, so they don't have a perennial root mass. They don't store carbon other than in the growing season. So you don't get much carbon stored in the soil in these high fertility habitats that are just taken over with nettles and things like that. And, they're just kind of rubbishy. But with our species-rich grasslands, we get a net storage of carbon because the majority of the plants growing on these lovely bits of chalk downland and lowland meadow are perennial plants. So they have a root mass that stays around throughout the year, all the way through the winter, and just keeps growing and growing, and it can increase over time the amount of carbon stored in the soil. And I will also say that some grasslands are actually more effective carbon storers than some woodlands, but that's a thing for another talk. But anyway, is there any literature to support this? Yes, there is. Here's a nice short list of articles that I'd be happy to send to anyone that briefly describe why species-rich grassland is better than any other kind of grassland. So why else is that important? So in the past 90 odd years, we've seen a 97% loss of species-rich grasslands, which is mainly down to changing land use and the intensification of agriculture. But, what does 97% look like? It's a big number, obviously, but, West Berkshire, this is 100% from West Berkshire coloured in. That is 3% down there. So 97% loss looks something like that. So it's pretty significant. So if we were to manage the entire rural verge network sensitively for species-rich grasslands and, put a lot of money into it, you could be looking at a gain of 310 hectares of species-rich grassland, but that is very much pie in the sky kind of numbers. But that would be a pretty great target to head towards. So thank you very much for listening. There's my web address for our project website and my email below. Please feel free to send me any emails, any questions. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Simon. Any questions from the room? Erica.
I know that this project was set up a few years ago as a sort of pilot to do some baseline studies and so on. Have we got a relationship with BBOUT going forwards on this project, or are we now at the stage where we need to think about whether we take it any further, just so that I'm clear? We've obviously got the three options that Simon, is it now up to the council to decide which one of those it might wish us to do?
Yes, I will say the BBOUT relationship is currently under review. I know there's things being done by our lawyers to look at extensions, and in terms of what to do with the wildflower veggies trial next, we will be reviewing the results properly once Simon and colleagues share all the details with us to see what's worked well and what can be improved, and then we'll look at specific locations where we can potentially expand these schemes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, thank you very much, Simon. I mean, I didn't understand the different sorts of veggies and what the, difference. Yeah, so that was interesting. Well, I could sort of grasp from this, but all the figures in that were a little bit overwhelming. So the decision is a little bit way off about what we actually do as regards to different options. So it's sort of like watch the space, basically.
Yeah, I think, Simon, thank you for the presentation. I think just to clarify, you're writing a report on the various options to come to the relevant portfolio holders in the near future and officers. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm currently working with my chief contact at the Countryside team, Paul Hendry, and yeah.
Could I ask, and again, this is a bit of a layperson question, so apologies if it sounds stupid. Is there a fourth option, surely, which is to tackle just the low grade area in terms of trying to find a happy medium between cost versus benefit, if you know what I mean?
So I would say that the worse the state of a verge is, the significantly more expensive it is to sort out, and that it would be, well, I mean, the way I've done the recommendations is that the verges that are already close to being good and nice and what we'd like to see, where you don't need to cut it as much, they don't grow into the road, those are the higher grade verges already. So, start with the easy stuff and then work on the more difficult stuff in time.
Thank you. Any further questions from the room? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying, as a rural councillor, I get a lot of complaints from parish councils about verge cutting and whether you're going to cut the verge, because I can't see with my SUV and I go around the corner and so on. So whatever we do with this, we are going to have to think about communication with the public as well, I think, so that they understand why we're doing it and what the benefits are. We did, Paul very kindly put in some wildflower turf in East Ilsley about 3 years ago, and that does look absolutely stunning when it comes up. But I realise that is quite an expensive option, because you literally take out all the rank grasses and you do treatments that you wouldn't usually wish to do, but it kills everything off and makes it much better for the long term. But again, it's the kind of thing we can integrate with other projects.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Any questions online at all? No, marvellous. In that case, thank you very much, Simon, for coming along and presenting. Really interesting. Yeah, looking forward to see the options paper.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So that brings us on to item 7 on the agenda, which is a discussion for any potential topics for future open parts of the EAG. And if anyone's got any ideas or topics that perhaps we would like to cover off at an open element. So I've got Councillor Abs.
Yeah, I'd like to get an update on both wind, but disturbed wind projects that are out there, because there's several technologies now coming along that with West Berkshire, we're not going to end up proposing a whole bunch of large turbines, but there are ground level things that can start to make a difference I'm sure Kofi's researched them, but anyway, I mean, there's some topics there that we could look at in terms of what we could do to effectively be an incubator unit for some of the companies that are coming up worldwide with this, say, ground level or building top type wind stuff, which would be micro wind, but would be significant considering the amount of buildings that we have in West Berkshire. And obviously, I really like to get an update for everybody on the micro hydro project. You know, where are we? You know, it's been knocking on a year since it was first talked about at EAG, and we were, and it was, you know, well, not a year yet. Sorry, I'm exaggerating, but but certainly, it seems like a year to me. And I really like us to have a look at that, especially with respect to how we might connect together micro hydro electricity generation with heat exchanger technologies within the water courses, and possibly feed things like that into, say, the Lido is the obvious example. This isn't new stuff that I'm saying here. Kofi knows, you know, Kofi's heard me make these comments before, so it would be nice to get some of that. What progress are we making back out into the public?
I think I must admit I've spent a lot of time looking at water over the last month or so, and I think it's fair to say that
if you can harness that kind of stuff, then fair enough. But I mean, let's face it. The one positive about the flood I can think of is it shows you at this time of year we have a lot of water, which is actually when we need more energy as well. So, you know, even if we gave it all to Thames Water to do the sewage pumping properly, you know, we would still be on a net gain there.
Yeah, we've got some significant waterways, so I think significant opportunities around micro hydro for sure.
We do, and even if it's not so valid in the summer, it's certainly valid when we need it in the winter.
Yeah, for sure. I've got Jeff Mays, and then I'll come back to you, if that's okay. Councillor Mays, you're on mute if you're talking. Do you have a question?
Just promoted from attendee to panelists.
Okay, so we'll be able to talk in a sec. Councillor Mays, are you able to unmute? I saw your hand raised just a second ago. Oh, there it is. I will go to Councillor Culver and we'll come back to Councillor Mays.
Just linked to the issue about water, I think it might be worth looking at mitigation. So what can we do environmentally to mitigate about flooding in the future? And I think I've mentioned to you about the guy who's interested in a beacon project.
Yeah.
And he'll come forward and talk in public more about that when he's ready, I think. But there are various schemes that have worked quite well in terms of flood alleviation, like mechanical schemes essentially. But can we do anything more environmentally to deal with that? Because I think it is going to be a bigger problem in the future. And as a council, we're going to be responsible for doing the Section 19 report about the flooding. So if we can integrate the environment into that thinking, I think that would be quite useful.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a really good example is the Eastbury Flood Alleviation Scheme, which is pretty much nature-based in the way it's designed with, you know, not bad. It's not a big reservoir of concrete, I guess, is what my baseline that I'm working from. But you know, it's a good example of something that we can do fairly locally. Ed,
I was just going to say, you've got actually for the Rib Kennet, I'll get them in and see if they've got any ideas.
Yeah, that's a really good challenge.
I know they've been looking at integrated constructed wetlands, you know, to help water companies deal with some of their issues potentially.
Yeah, there's one at Hampstead Norreys they're working on actually.
Yeah, don't quite like having Marlborough as well. We're taking a lot of wetlands for flood. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, thank you. But one of the other things that I would like to add is a bit more of a brainstorming session to continue to fill the pipeline, you know, longer term around getting both the council to net zero, but also influencing the wider district to net zero. And I'm quite keen to use that as a bit of a brainstorm sesh, really. Anyone interested that's got some ideas, I'd like to try and get that on the agenda. I think we've spoken about it in the past. Have perhaps some kind of targeted topics for perhaps one half of an open EAG session.
It's really open forum.
Yeah, just to really open it, because I'm a big believer that, you know, this is around influencing policy. You know, a big part of the EAG is around influencing council policy, and actually one of the biggest challenges we've got is, you continuing our drive to net zero. So why not harness the great minds that we've got around the district, and look at what from a council perspective, what do people think of, and also from a wider district perspective, how can we look at influencing, the right behaviours. But that's certainly from one thing that I'd like to take away and continue to work on closely, so we can get that on the agenda at some point in the near future.
But we promote that when we decide at the parish climate forum. So we encourage people to, because we don't get many representatives from the parishes tuning into this, although we have told them that it happens. But I think maybe just giving them a reason that they will be able to contribute.
And I think doing a bit of pre-work before that would be good to heighten the awareness of get the brain working a wee bit ahead of something like that. For all of us, I think would be a good step to making the most out of that kind of brainstorming session, really. Cool, excellent. If there is nothing else, item 8 is AOB. Any AOB around the table from anyone around? Anyone online got any AOB in the open session? No, marvellous. In that case, episode 9, item 9 on the agenda. I've been watching too much Traitors recently. My excuse and apologies. Item 9 on the agenda is future meeting dates. So the next meeting is scheduled for Monday, the 25th of March. So excellent. Thank you very much to all of the presenters this evening, those in the room and those online. It's been really, really interesting. And I go back to what I said earlier on. It's really great to hear the great work that's going on around the district and where we've got people leading the way on different issues and different topics. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it develops over the coming months, years, and over decades, really. So thank you very much to all of you coming along this evening. That concludes the open session. Can I ask you to remain seated until the Zoom host has ended the live stream?